This is Raul Lopez, and you're listening to How Do You Say Success in Spanglish? The path to success isn't easy. For minorities and people of color, many attempt this journey with little to no guidance. Join me as I sit down with individuals who share their stories of perseverance so that together we can learn how to say success in Spanglish. What's good, mi gente? Welcome back, and thanks for joining us today. This is your boy Raul. We have today a special guest coming all the way from Los Angeles, Mr. Andy Deossa. What's going on?
What's going on, Raul, man? Happy to be here. Happy to chop it up a little bit, get into the good of the story and whatnot, and just happy to connect again, man.
Yeah, man. It's been a while, but I appreciate you being here. Andy Deossa is a senior editor at Yahoo Sports. He's also from my hometown, Pawtucket, although he did went to the rival school, so we got a little bit of beef going on there. But Andy, tell me a little bit about growing up in Pawtucket for you.
Yes, sir, man. The bucket. Always, Pawtucket is a very interesting place, Rhode Island in general, because it's so tiny. You just feel like everybody knows everybody. But it's funny that you do mention that about having a rivalry, because as small as a city that it is, there was some sense of rivalry between one side and the other side, depending on what school you went to, depending on who you hung out with. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's just, like I said, small. So I felt like I was just always outside with friends, and everybody was just kind of in the same circles, if that makes sense. And it was fun. It was fun. I feel like I definitely enjoyed my childhood because there was a lot to do just in a small little place. And now with definitely McCoy Stadium, that I just saw they did the last little event over there. It's sad, but I used to live right down the street and go to school across the street for many years of McCoy. So there was just a lot in the city that definitely helped me. I think and that was like a big way I became a Red Sox fan. So like that's just one example of like how it helped me in a lot of ways in the future. But I enjoy Pawtucket, man. I know a lot of people have certain things to say about like back home, but I've always been a fan. I think maybe the proximity that helps. I've always been more of a fan of like a more close community than a larger community, which is crazy saying that living in LA now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, man. It was fun.
And so it's funny you talk about the McCoy Stadium. So for people who don't know, McCoy Stadium is the AAA team for the Red Sox that was in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And for all of us growing up, they were like $3 tickets to go watch a game. And for a lot of us, it was some of our first and for many of our broke asses, only times we went to go see baseball, as kids. And, I know you do, your focus is on sports and Yahoo Sports. And so was that kind of where you started wanting to be interested in doing some sort of sports industry?
Yeah, I've always just been a big sports fan. And I know it's typical for kids to say that in general, but I really was like just into it, like very into it in a different way, not just a fan, but remembering stats and knowing certain things like from a young age that it was just typical conversation you would have with your friends, you just have it in school. But I think I started piecing it together little by little. But I would say that the Paw Sox definitely helped because it had me be a lot more involved in what the Red Sox were doing, because it's a farm system. Like you say, it's AAA. So you're getting to see, these players that are coming up naturally that are going to go on to be stars. And a lot of them did go on to be stars.
Yep.
And people that are known all around the country. So it was cool to kind of be like, hey, I saw him, while he was coming through, and kind of just knowing those players from the beginning. It also gave me like a sense of like, yeah, like I followed this guy's career almost. And then, you go on to play for the Red Sox and play for other teams in the majors, and they become, these big celebrities. So that was definitely cool, just being around that. And I've always just been around sports in general, either playing or supporting family, cousins, and people that are playing sports. So it's literally always been a part of my life, and it just, I guess, happened naturally more than anything.
Yeah, and it's interesting the dichotomy that you can deal with in Pawtucket, where depending on who you talk to, you'll get a different reaction. You talk to other people in Rhode Island or parts of New England that know Pawtucket, the rough side, and like, oh, you're from Pawtucket, you're from the bucket. And then you have other people who are like, you're from Pawtucket. Oh yeah, I've seen a Red Sox game there. And it's like, it's a completely different perspective. They're like, oh, it's a charming little city and stuff like that. I was like, you didn't stay out after night, did you? Right. So,
you didn't go too far past the stadium.
They went to the stadium, and then they went back to somewhere else to go hang out, and they went back to Newport for the weekend, and
right.
it's funny, and I think for a lot of us, we grow up in there, and I think we're always kind of split between getting too far into what's going on in the streets, especially because the way things are, and trying to stay balanced and stay away from it. How was did that affect you at all? Would you ever run into any issues regarding balancing your life out and not getting caught up in it?
For sure, for sure. Like I said, I was always outside. It just felt like I was really one of them kids. I was like, I would get home from school and I would just put my stuff on and then just go right back outside and just to meet up with people. Cause like I said, everything is so close and everybody's so close that you're just like, all right, what are we doing? Where are we going? We're gonna go play basketball. We're gonna go like mess around and rob the corner store or something like just like some stupid, stuff that kids do when they're younger. And there was definitely like moments that, were probably leading to certain things that wouldn't have been the best. Just in general, I think when you not so much in middle school, I think more in high school when you kind of just feel like nobody could tell you anything, and you're not gonna listen to anything that anybody says anyway. So you're kind of just like I'm grown now. I'm a freshman in high school at Tolman. Like I'm gonna do whatever, and then like those first few years were like me figuring out like, man, like I had a lot of friends that were, up like doing crazy stuff, nothing super crazy, but just up to no good. And it's easy to follow it when you're that age, easy to fall into peer pressure. So, following people, fighting and stuff like that, like just people that was always just doing crazy stuff until one point I was like, all right, man, I gotta kind of stray away from this because I don't want to do this. I don't want something really bad to happen. Nothing bad really happened to anybody close to me, thankfully.
Mm,
But I knew people that would fight every day, people that would break into people's, cars or whatever,
yeah.
like stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't want to be associated with certain things because then it's gonna be a bad look on me. So it was just about kind of navigating that fine line and then realizing at a certain time in high school, like, yo, this is gonna lead to the next thing, and the next thing is dictated by what I do now. So that's kind of how I handle it.
And I think as people of color, we always kind of, you don't realize it as a young age, but you're always kind of one mistake away from ruining everything. You know what I mean? You have that, and I think for some of us, we have that one night where we're like, oh shit, I need to chill because I want to
Right.
go to college. Like for me, I think I've done some stuff, and then I'm like at the end of the day, I'm like, yo, if we had gotten caught tonight, I would have been in jail and I wouldn't have gone to college. So it's hard to balance that out. Was college a focus for you, or a main focus for you early on, or was it kind of something later on in life?
Yeah, no, that was definitely the plan. I think it was just natural progression in the trajectory of like I have an older sister, and she graduated from Tillman. She went to college. My older cousin, likewise. So I just I thought that was just what was natural to do, and I didn't really have any other thought of what I wanted to do really because I just thought it was just the next thing in line almost. But it did in that kind of way it did really make me realize like I didn't want to stay in Rhode Island. And I think that's part of the growing up that happened for me was like, okay, I loved it when I was there and I have the same friends that I've had, maybe some since elementary school, maybe some since middle school. But I saw like that next step being like the open all the doors type of advantage where like you could pick anywhere you want to go. Like you have to get in first, but you could pick anywhere you want. Like
Yeah.
if you have ambition and you have the qualities to do it. So I literally only applied to one school in Rhode Island. I knew I wasn't getting into Bryan anyway because I wasn't doing business, but I just
Hmm.
liked the school, so I decided to apply there. But
Hmm.
I was like, I'm not staying. Like I'm not going to. No offense to URI, to Rick, to anything. I wanted to see something different. So, but yeah, it was definitely part of just the next step in process that I just knew I had to kind of go to school and see what was next in the future.
Yeah, and for Rhode Island, we're small, like you said earlier. We're small. People know each other. You know what I mean? Everybody ends up knowing somebody. This was before Facebook for me. You don't realize how much people knew until now, and you're like, hold on, they know that person and that person and that person and that person's your cousin, and so it's really small. And then when you get to like college, it uh if you end up going very local, it still feels the same way. For a lot of us, it feels like you're going to like the 13th grade
Yeah.
for it. And so some of us try to get out and say, I don't want to stick around with that. So where'd you end up
Mhm.
going for college?
Yeah, so I ended up going to Suffolk University in Boston, and I was really, like, I thought a few things about Boston. Like it was close enough, but also far enough
Yeah.
that I was like, I'm taking a step, and I don't need to be around, all the same people. I thought Boston was cool because it had all these schools. So I'm like, man, there are so many students. Like it's gonna be like the perfect college experience because you're gonna meet so many people. And then, like I mentioned, my older cousin, he had played soccer at Boston University, and I was like, growing up, that was like my big brother. So I was like, oh, I used to go to watch him play soccer when I was younger
Mhm.
up in Boston. I'm like, man, like I really like it. So I was set on Boston. It was between Boston and New York, go figure. But I ended up choosing Boston to go to school, and I definitely have zero regrets about that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of did the same thing. I was like, Boston's far enough that I can't go to my parents for everything, but close enough that if I really needed to, I could.
Right.
I do kind of wish I would have loved one of the ones I wanted to go to was Tulane. I didn't apply to Tulane, but I was like, oh. And then after going to New Orleans, I was like, ah, man, I should have went to Tulane, but if I wouldn't have graduated, if I was in New Orleans for 4 years.
Man, listen. I
But
know.
so what? When you went to Suffolk, what were you studying?
So I actually went in as a broadcast journalism major.
Mhm,
That was my pick. And it was funny because basically it was a process of elimination for me when I was in high school, trying to decide what I wanted to do.
mhm,
And I just knew like off rip, I hated math. So I was like, anything that has to do with numbers, like get me out of there. That like we're gonna cross that off the list right away. And then we kind of started going like filtering things down. And I remember I had one teacher in Tolman, well, not just one, but one that stuck in my mind that was like, hey, like you're a pretty good writer, just like, naturally. And I'm like, okay, so when I was thinking about majors, I'm like, maybe this journalism thing could be pretty cool. And the broadcast side came because I'm like, being on TV or being like in front of a camera seems pretty awesome. Like, I'm down for that. So
mhm.
that was literally how it came about. I was like, I'm just gonna try this out. But I quickly realized like, oh, I could mix this with sports, which is my passion. Growing as I got older, it became more and more of a passion. It wasn't just baseball, it wasn't just soccer. So that kind of like intertwined together, and it was like a pretty perfect marriage from the beginning.
Nice. And when you were at school, I know we talked a little bit about your during the pre-interview. You mentioned that you had to kind of deal with doubters. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was a process, man. So I actually ended up getting out of broadcast because I had a professor that I really did not like. And he was like, he made it a little difficult and made me realize that, it wasn't really something I wanted to do as much anymore. So I ended up switching to print journalism, which is a lot more focused on the writing aspect, which is what I realized that I did enjoy doing. But in that time, I was already taking the steps to realize that I wanted to do that. I was working for my school publication, which is like our online newspaper. And I just got into it that way. And I would be writing and writing and writing, and this is a super, super long story, but it ended up being like towards the end of my undergrad career where I was an RA. I became an RA like the end of my sophomore year, which is pretty ironic now I think about it. So I applied to be an RA my junior year. I ended up getting it at the end of my sophomore year because the person that was one of the kids got fired. So I basically like filled his spot. So I filled his spot for the last 2 months of sophomore year. Then my junior year, I was like already in. Then I ended up getting fired my junior year as an RA because I was I was not where I was supposed to be. Let's leave it that way. And it was like a real messy, complicated situation that I didn't really do anything wrong, but I just wasn't in the building. I wasn't in the building when I was supposed to be in the building. That's as simple as it gets. But because that happened, I kind of felt not felt. I definitely got a lot of staff members or like a lot of like, oh, he got fired. Like he must have done something like really bad. And I'm sure there were probably a lot of rumors about what actually happened. Obviously, I know what happened. It wasn't, life or death situation. Um, but that ended up happening. So within those years, I was, going through the progress of my online newspaper. So I started as a writer, then I became a sports editor, then I was like, managing editor. So I was going towards the steps to be in charge of the whole website. So that was gonna be like my goal. Like I'm gonna run this whole website for when I graduate. I'm gonna leave it in like great hands, and then I'm out of here. And within that process, you have to apply because it's like a leadership position, which I obviously had around campus. But because I got fired from one, it was like, oh no, like he's almost like blacklisted from this because he showed that he can't handle a leadership position. So it was an interview. It was me and a girl that was part of our website that was applying for the same, position. No offense to her, she was a great writer, but she wasn't as involved as I was. I ended up getting denied for it, of course, but I had to interview with like the dean of the school. So it wasn't just like, oh, just talk to a few
Mhm.
people. I ended up getting denied and ended up doing the role that I was gonna do when I got it anyway. I ended up still being that. Like I ended up me and another friend ended up redesigning the website. We ended up, just doing all these different things to put it in a better position, for when we were leaving. But in between that, it was just like a lot of people kind of turning their back, like, oh, he got fired from this. Like I said, once again, probably because of whatever they put in their head to be like, oh, he can't be a leader, or we can't include him in certain things. And I'm like, all right, man, if that's what you guys want to do, that's perfect. But I don't really care. I'm still gonna be focused. I'm still gonna do what I wanted to do for myself because I knew it was gonna benefit me in the long haul. And I knew it was gonna benefit all the people that were after me, the writers that we had, my friends. And I was like, I had a goal. And my goal was to turn up with that website and make it like really good while we were there. Whatever happened after, I have no, control over that. I'm gone. But I was like, the 4 years that I was there, I could proudly say that when I got there to when I left, it was night and day. We ended up winning like an award that year for like the most improved student organization in the whole university.
Yeah,
And
nice.
of course, I went up to the stage to do the thank you speech and get the trophy. So that was like a beautiful full circle moment. But yeah, it was just that, just negativity from certain people and just kind of people looking at me in a different light for, like I said, I didn't commit a crime. I didn't do anything
Yeah.
crazy. So it was a weird situation, but one that I definitely learned from. And, I feel like I came on top for sure.
And I think we talked earlier about Pawtucket being small, and everything you do in Pawtucket is uh, people will find out. Pawtucket and Rhode Island, it's a general college is kind of the same way. It's such a small community. You mess up a little bit in one thing, someone's gonna hear about it. Like when I lived in my apartment, on campus apartment, my fraternity brother Christian, who was one of the people I interviewed early on in my podcast,
Mhm.
he was able to link us to the printer downstairs because we
Mm.
had a computer room downstairs. So we would send print stuff, go downstairs, pick it up. It wasn't official because the school likes to charge you 10 cents per print or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we weren't doing it. So eventually they cut us off, and we were like, whatever. Well, fast forward 2 years, I'm applying for a job at the IT department, and they're like, "We have a record of you hacking into the printer," and and I'm like, "My friend set me up. I didn't know we couldn't do it, and I didn't get the job. I ended up getting the job again the following semester, but it's like."
So
We
funny, man.
we talked a little bit too about how it always feels like you're always one mistake from having
Mhm. Mhm.
to ruin everything, and then when you do something even slightly, you have to work twice as hard, to get there. So, what kept you motivated during that process?
It was just a good like test and a good sign. I'm one of those people like if somebody doubts me, I'm coming back with extra fire. So I was like, yeah, I was super involved, and the school is a small school, so the way you related to Rhode Island is a cool point because like my school was tiny, like everybody really did know everybody if you're in certain circles. But I was involved in everything. I was an orientation leader, I was an RA, I was a TA, like I had a work study job in the office. Like I did a lot of stuff at that school, so everybody really knew me in those circles. Um, and my motivation was like a lot of people did turn their back and kind of look at me in a different way, but a lot of people still held me down and were like, yo, like I know that, a lot of people know what happened, like the actual details of the night and the situation. But once again, I wasn't doing anything crazy. But it was a thing, it was hard because now I didn't have housing. The RA, the perk of being an RA is you have the housing. And I'm like, now I'm kind of screwed because I got to go all the way back home to Rhode Island. Now it seems far than it did, my freshman year. So now I got to go back to Rhode Island and like figure it out, but I had friends that held me down. Like I went like one of my homies. I was a freshman at a different school in Boston. He let me like sleep at his spot with like his suite mates. It was like six of them in there, and I'm just like crashing because I was so busy during the day that I would wake up, take a shower, and I'm out all day. Like I was like, bro, you're literally not gonna see me here except that night. And it was towards the end of the semester, so it was only like for a few months. But like people held me down, bro. I would bring a suitcase with me. Like on Monday, I would leave it at my job, my work study office. They never turned their back on me. Salute to them. I would leave it there. They gave me a key to the office, so I would like be able to open it whenever I wanted. And I was like deep inside, I knew once again, like I didn't do anything wrong. And I knew that my focus was always going to be like work as hard as you can on this journalism thing because you have to make something out of it. You're already dedicating this much time to it. Like make it worth it, make it worth it. And that's always what I tell myself. Like if you're gonna do something that you really are passionate about, like dedicate 100% to it and do it. Like don't half-ass it. Don't like do it like here and there. And that's what I learned from my freshman year to my senior year. Like I was the most active writer the website had. Like I changed a lot of things at that website, and it helped me, of course, as much as it did the outlet itself. But I was like, I have an advantage like on in my hands. I'm gonna take full advantage of it, and thankfully I did, and thankfully it panned out.
Yeah, it's the hands-on experience in college. I think counts a lot for people. We sometimes don't know better. We don't do internships. We don't sign up for things like that. And when you get to the point where you are looking for a job, you're kind of behind because you don't have experience. You get this paper that says you graduated, but no work behind it. And other people who know people sometimes get a little bit luckier in being able to get put in a position. So you finish up at Suffolk and you're ready to start looking at career. What were some of the barriers you had to deal with starting off?
Man, it was so funny for me because I was like, all right, let's shoot for the stars because I felt like I had accomplished so much. And in a way I did because I ended up having a co-op for the Boston Globe. So I worked for them for a year while I was still in school. And I'm like, this is a crazy experience to have. Like, this is one of the best newspapers in the country, one of the best sports sections in the country at a time where every Boston team was winning championships. Like, it was the craziest experience ever. And it was amazing. So I'm like, man, I'm already like on this high that I'm like, man, forget this school. Like, once I graduate, I'm out of here anyway. Like, I'm gonna do it. And I got super lucky, man. I'll always say I got super lucky. Like, I was like, I'm gonna go work at ESPN. Like, that's just gonna be, and that's what everybody says in sports. Um, but I was just throwing applications out, left and right, trying to land something, and I was able to land an interview. Luckily, which is like, it's crazy because it's such a competitive process. But I knew that I'm the same way, and I'm still the same way now. Like, I knew if there's a little slit of the door open, I'm busting through it like the Kool-Aid man, like both feet. Yeah, like
Oh
if
yeah.
you get me in like on campus, I'm not leaving there without something. Like, I'm gonna. So I was confident enough in myself that when I had to go in for this interview, which was the craziest interview process I've ever been a part of, I was like, I'm gonna be able to do it. And it was wild because it was for a role they were hiring 4 people for this role because it was a rotational. It was almost like a glorified internship, if that makes sense. Like, it was a paid position, but it was like a year with rotation. So you were going to 4 different parts of the company. And the goal was once you finished the year, you would figure out which one you enjoyed the most. I was like, oh, it seems cool because you get to see, I think it was like ESPN, the magazine at the time. Then you got to work like digital, then you got to work with radio or something, whatever. So I was like, this is cool. But within the interview process, I met with so many people because I was there all day. So I was just meeting people that had interest in the applicant pool because it was like 20 of us. And so I was having interviews for ESPN Deportes and interviews for ESPN.com and the apps and stuff like that. So once again, like I told myself when I left there that day, I was confident like, yo, something has to be offered because if not, then I just spent a long time talking to a lot of people and I didn't do a good enough job and I don't like that. So that's kind of how it happened. And so be it, I didn't end up getting the job I applied for, which is the rotational one. But because I had met so many people that day, I had an offer from another interview that I had that wasn't necessarily part of the process. And I kind of just went along with that and was like, okay, weigh my options out because there was another guy that day that I talked to on ESPN Deportes that was like, yo, I'm interested. Obviously, being bilingual helps. So he was like super interested in, bringing me on for more information. But I ended up taking a role with like an assistant editor for like .com in the digital department area, which is like the mobile application, the mobile website, working with the different apps that they had at the time and things like that. So I got lucky, man. Like I always say that. I just think things happen at the right time, but it's also a testament to the amount of work that you put in. But having that be like my first job out of college was like, oh snap, because I was like, I have to move to Connecticut now. Like, I got to get up and go, and it was
And it's a
a
very,
quick
very
turnaround.
middle of nowhere, Connecticut too.
Middle of nowhere, yeah.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
Hmm.
So it was like I graduated May 18th or something like that, and I started at ESPN like June, like in the middle of June. So it was like a month, if that, maybe that between that process from Rhode Island, like I bought a used car. Like I didn't have a car because I was in school in Boston, so I like bought a used car, packed a few things up that I had at my mom's crib, and I was like, boom, I'm going down to CT. Luckily, I had people that I knew there that were in Connecticut that I was able to like live with for the first, well, actually not for the first years, for the whole time I was there, really. And that helped a lot too. But yeah, it was a quick turnaround process, but luckily it was like shoot for the stars, and I landed it. Luckily, man.
So you talked a bit about your interview with ESPN, and I know other people who have also worked at ESPN, um, and they tell me about that interview, and you have to be super knowledgeable. Can you tell me a little bit about what that interview process felt like?
Yeah, man. Like I said, it was probably one of the most intense or the most intense interview process I was part of. Partly because you're, very nervous in general to be at such a big company and try to make a good impression because they're meeting thousands of people and there's probably thousands of applicants. But the other part of it is the knowledge and being very confident in like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. So, for example, I had to sit down in an interview with a panel of 4 people. And I'm like, I don't know how to impress 4 people at once. Like, what if one person thinks I'm saying the right thing and the other one doesn't? Like, how does that work out on their end? But in my head, I'm like, I can only do the best I can, right? So they would ask the typical stuff like, what are some of your favorite writers, or like, what type of content do you consume? So you have to like actually be a consumer, which is natural for the way that the time that it was. Like people were, really online and using a lot of apps and stuff like that. But B, it was like there was a sports knowledge test that I had to take that I was like, oh man, like that's when you're really put to the test, and realizing that something that you may take for granted, you forget it in the moment because it's a time thing. You're there, like you're in person doing this, writing it down. And I know there's a few questions on that I answered wrong that I know I would have answered right if I wasn't under pressure, but I think that's just part of the process. But it really is just being in the know of what the company's like, especially the part of the company that you're looking to get into because it's such a big company. And then really just having the knowledge, because when you do end up getting a job, when you do start working there, the knowledge is half of the battle. Like just knowing what's going on in the sports world really is half the battle. If you're working in a role that has to do with, live sports and updating content and stuff like that. So it was intense, but like I said, I was super confident in what I was going into because I thought that I had a great experience, and I from my, from college and my experiences in college, that I was going to be able to do this. And it's funny because I didn't work with apps in college. And that's what I ended up doing for the first like year that I was at ESPN, was like working with apps. But you learn. It's all about the learning process, all about like realizing how different it is from, the jump that I was at working at newspapers and working on stuff like that to a more digital space, it was a cool transition for sure.
Yeah, and I think for one of the misconceptions that we have with our degrees sometimes is that this is the job I'm going to go for the rest of my life. And realistically, your bachelor kind of tells people you could learn. We can teach you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Your bachelor doesn't say you're an expert in this. It just says that you can learn and you've passed enough to learn what's going on. And the sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But the and so we go in the job and we're like, oh, I don't know anything, and we learn here and then we pick up something and we become a little bit more expert in this and then start moving from there. And so you said you started with apps, you started at ESPN. Was what eventually got you to actually the print journalism aspect of things?
Yeah. So it's funny because I took a huge break from it because I was caught up in this digital space that I was like, man, this is A, it's pretty intense, but B, like there weren't the amount of writing opportunities that I thought I would have at ESPN. And I'm like, I'm working with apps, I'm doing like editorial stuff that does have to do with writing, but I wasn't writing myself, like writing stories, writing articles or whatever. So that was kind of the part of the next transition where I was like, okay, I've been here for a few years, like I've bounced around and had all these different roles and worked on all these different things. How could I get some writing opportunities? And it was like I said, very few. I did end up getting some, which was amazing. Have had some people help me out and connect me with the right people and have a chance, which was hilarious because my first assignment was to go to a UConn game, which naturally it's Connecticut, is down the street. I went to cover a UConn football game, and I know that the college football team was like, we'll send him to this game because they're gonna get blown out. They were playing Houston. Houston was ranked like 15th in the country at the time. So like, it's probably going to be an easy game. UConn
Hmm.
loses, whatever. He's covering a ranked team. He gets to write something easy. Everybody cleans their hands and we're out. UConn ended up winning that game.
Oh.
it was complete mayhem at that game. And I'm like, this is the type of stuff I like. Like, this is what the rush of like, oh snap, we thought one thing was going to happen. This happened. Now I'm like, now the focus is on me because I'm at the game and a ranked team just lost. So I'm like banging it out quickly. Then I wrote a story for the next day, like a more long form. So it was super cool. And it reminded me of like, wow, this is what I did when I was in Boston and I really enjoyed it. This is why I got into it. But like I said, the opportunities were very few. And that's what ended up basically leading to me like, yo, I need to go somewhere else and see if it's a possibility that I would even have a chance to do writing at some capacity the way I want to at a different company or at a different job. And it's very hard to walk away from a great job, a great place, somewhere that I learned so much. But I'm like, 5 years is a long time. Like I was there for 5 years. And I'm like, if I'm not happy with what I'm doing, why is complacency going to be the only thing that keeps me at a place like that? So that's what it was. But yeah, the transition is tough because you think you get to ESPN and all these doors are going to necessarily open for you. But you have to find them, and some of them might be locked for real. Some of them might not open for you. So it's tough, but it was a good learning process for sure.
And what's the industry like when it comes to job availability? Is it I had another friend of mine, another person, Omar Cabrera, who does more journalist, TV and stuff like that. And in that type of capacity, it's limited because there's only a certain number of people that actually end up in front of a camera, so you can't
Right.
go there. As a writer, you don't really generally see them, but also
Hmm.
we know that as print journalism has kind of been evolving throughout the years, it's the amount of jobs and the amount of newspapers and the amount of magazines and things have kind of declined as well. What was the job market like for you at that when you were looking for that type of job?
That's what, and you bring up a great point. Like that's what it is. I remember when I got into journalism, people were like, "Why? Like it's not going to pay well." And you hear that a lot of times when you're younger. Like, "Why are you going to major in this? It's not going to pay well." I'm like, because I think it's going to be fun. Like I was like, we'll figure that out when we cross the bridge. Like if we have to, but I'm like, I'm going to do something that I would like to do instead of doing something that I didn't like to do. But when I was looking for these jobs, I'm like, man, like there's not a lot of writing. Like there were writing jobs, but then I ran into like this doesn't pay well for real, and I'm like, oh, now I get it. Like this is why people are telling me this because now I'm like desperate for a job, and I'm like, wow, like there may be opportunities because if you think about it, any outlet, any newspaper at the time when newspapers were still not on their last legs, they're looking for either people that will cover high school sports, people that will cover college sports, professional. So there is a lot of opportunity, but it's just like the compensation and what you get back from it is not the same because it's a grind. Like I used to cover high school sports. They don't give you any stats, so you have to record all the stats on your own. Then you have to leave the game and then write on deadline from probably like a McDonald's because McDonald's has free Wi-Fi. Like just the grind of doing it, I learned so much. But I'm like, damn, like if I was to do this for a career, like it's not when you go to cover a professional game, they hand you a paper for stats, they hand you a paper for the lineup, they hand you a paper for this, for that. So you have all the information. And if it's a professional team, you can just go online and find whatever you need. So you learn like humbly the ins and outs, and you're like, man, I'm doing a lot of work sometimes for like something that's not giving me back as much as I would think. So when I was applying for these jobs, I was just finding a lot of like digital jobs, stuff that I was already doing at ESPN, just at a different place. And I'm like, maybe I'll have to check that out because it's probably going to be an easier transition depending on where I end up landing. But, I applied all over the country because I wasn't stuck to staying anywhere, single, no kids, no pets, no nothing. So I was like, I could get up and leave tomorrow if I want to. But yeah, I was looking at specific writing jobs, but there weren't many that popped out that were like, sure, let me do that. So it's tough. It's definitely a tough market to break into, and not only break into, like to sustain it because, like you said, everything changes digitally, and with that change comes jobs going away, comes different responsibilities, and then you start thinking about like, what did I really want to get into this for, and what am I actually doing right now?
So you ended up eventually going to Los Angeles and working there. Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, so I applied for a job at Yahoo Sports. That was an editorial role, which was ironically literally probably 85% of what I was doing at ESPN at the last role when I
Hmm.
left. But like I said, it was an opportunity for me to get somewhere new and see what I could make out of it. And I'll always remember when I had my interview, I interviewed down in New York City because we have offices on both coasts. And I met with, some of the people that were on the team there, and they were like, what do you like? What do you want to do though? Like, this is the job that you're applying for, but like, what is your like goal? What is, where are you coming from? What is your passion? And I was like, I like writing. Like, I want to write. I don't want to necessarily say like I need to be a writer, pay me as a writer, like send me around the country so I could write stories. But I do want to try to get back into it because I had this passion. I stopped it for a while at ESPN, and I picked it up blogging little by little, like on my own accord. And I was getting a lot of like feedback and fun from it because it's what everybody was used to seeing from me, and I was doing different things. So he's like, I suggest if you do want to do that, like if you do get a job, go out to Los Angeles because the editorial team is split between both offices. And most of the editors that like cover the sports are based in LA. So he's like, if you go to Los Angeles, you'll have a personal relationship with them. You'll be able to meet them and be able to explain kind of like what you want to do, and it'll benefit you. And I'm like, bro, I'm gonna move across the country, but I'm like, I had never been to California. I didn't know anything about it, but I'm like, bro, this is like an opportunity to check it.
Yeah.
If I hate it, New York is always going to be there. Like the office is there, and I could go back to it. So I was like, you know what? Let me take this risk and just like go do it. And that's really as simple as it was. Like I was like, man, I booked a one-way flight. I left everything I had, which was not much in Connecticut. I had my car shipped because they sent me, a nice little check for relocation. And I put a bunch of boxes in my car of like things I thought I would need, shoes mostly, and anything. Clothes. I came with 2 suitcases, and I'm like, yo, we're gonna find out about LA and see what it's like. And it was a process, it was a journey, and it was a lot of fun. I definitely think I made the right decision. But yeah, it was interesting for sure.
Yeah, I tell people all the time. I mean, I moved to Houston. I'm back in Connecticut now, but I moved to Houston like 15 years ago, and it was, a risk, but I was like, same thing. I'm single. I don't have kids. Let me take an opportunity to learn what the rest of this world has to offer me. And I love my time there. It was great when I lived in Houston, but I always tell people it's like save $500. That way you have money for gas to get back home, and then that's the
Right.
worst case scenario. Just keep 500 in a little jar under your drawer, and then worst case scenario, that's my go home money. And then but
Yeah.
it's it almost never ends up where they come back, and I think
Hmm.
learning and experiencing, especially when it's career, sometimes you need to take that risk to jump across and go and try a different location because not every place, not every city, not every place is um, has the type of careers you're looking for, especially if you're specifically when it comes to some sort of journalism or um, 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 anything in the media. But it's interesting you were talking about blogs. You went back into blogs, and that kind of helped you build yourself back up into
Yeah.
writing and getting you interested. And I know now everything's social and everything as well. What were some of the tools that you were able to use that helped you get back in there, like blogging or internet, social media?
Yeah, I had to do it because people don't realize writing is as any other skill. Like you have to do it for you to get sharper. So the amount of time I took off to when I started again, I'm like, damn, I took a lot of time off. And naturally, whenever you take time off of a craft, you're not going to be as sharp. So I had to get back into it that way. And I really utilized like I made my own little like blogspot page that was like my own little blog where it was almost like a portfolio to put my prior work on it, but it
Mhm.
was also an outlet that if I wanted to write something, I have somewhere to post it. I have a link, and once that link is out to the world, like it could hop on somebody's Google search and somebody's timeline on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So yeah, it's social. Good thing for me is like when I got to college, Twitter was like a really big. It had just started, so it wasn't big yet. And as I went on in undergrad, it was just getting so much more, just better in terms of like just being an outlet for news and sports and updates and things like that. So I was like hammering Twitter from the beginning, but I always remember like I was on it early because I got into it at a time that it was going to benefit me. So live tweeting games and stuff like that was such a popular thing back then that
Mhm.
I just naturally did that. When I was doing the blogging stuff, I was like, okay, let me find something that like is entertaining to people. So I used fantasy football as a way to kind of get back into that lane. And I would write a weekly blog about why I hated fantasy football that week. And it would be like the 5 things that happened to me in my fantasy leagues that like, of course they would happen to me. But it's relatable because a lot of people love playing fantasy. A lot of people feel the same way. People have the same type of players. So I was like, oh, this is fun. Like people are starting to be like interact with the stuff and hit me up about certain things. And it was like, damn, like I remember how much fun I had doing this when I was doing it in college for like just for fun, which is always to me, it still is for fun. But I was like, now I'm trying to find that next step. And also it's about building, I don't want to say a fan base because I don't think I have a fan base, but it's about building a character, building a voice. Like that's the one thing they tell you. And the ironic thing is that our website was called the Suffolk Voice. Like if you have a unique voice, people are going to always remember that. And when I say voice in writing, it's about a style, it's about a personality. So I was able to kind of do that early on where people were like, okay, this is the type of stuff that he's doing. And we're going to kind of see and interact with it because I've covered all types of sports. I did hockey, I did basketball, I did baseball, I did. But when I was in that moment that I was like, let me get back into this blogging thing, I'm like, oh yeah, like I remember, like this is exactly what I wanted to do and why I have so much fun doing it. So it was cool. It was a nice little transition period, but I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, and like you said, your skill is like it's like a sport. If you don't practice every week or you don't practice a little bit, you're gonna get worse and not build it. And I think now, and people I might not remember that when Twitter started, you weren't posting videos or pictures; it was all writing. You had
All right.
180 characters, and you had to write everything. And I
Yep.
remember live tweets being a really big thing back in the day.
Live tweeting was huge, man. And it was like it's just a way too, like it was so instant. And Instagram hadn't popped off like that crazy yet. It wasn't like the people in the reels and stuff. It was real like people going through the timeline and reading what was happening. Like even the few pictures we were posting on the timeline back then were like on awful quality
Yeah,
phones. So it's
yeah.
like, oh man, it was really like more of it. Honestly, for me, maybe because this is the lane I'm in, it felt like it was a specifically a news social media outlet. Like it
Mhm.
just felt like it was so easy to get news and get sports updates and get anything within the snap of a finger that I'm like, wow, like this is made for us. Like this is a perfect outlet for us to have and just run with. And we did, man. Like that's when live blogging for companies was big, and you would see like ESPN starting to do live blogs, and it was a wild transition, but it was cool to be part of in that moment and be like, wow, this is. And because of social media, even in college, I was able to get internships and stuff like that because people see your work, people see you. So it's a weird space to live in, but it's a very beneficial one if you use it the right way.
And what are some of the technology you see now that's kind of helping keep print journalism alive?
Yeah, it's the same thing, man. Like it's now the reach on social is unreal, where like now it's more visual. Now there's so many creatives that do cool things with videos and animations. I have friends that work all over the industry that are extremely talented that do things that live on social because that's how people consume stuff now. And it's hard, like you mentioned, to keep up when you're talking about it specifically print because like people don't like to read that much no more. I don't
Yeah.
know if people ever like to read that much. I'm a reader, but I'm not like a book. I don't go and read books. I read a lot of articles, but I'm not like I'm gonna sit down and read a book. But it's like, what do you do, right? So you have to almost kind of transition with that and be like, okay, you start seeing a lot of the writers start doing video stuff now. They start having podcasts. They start, they're not just it's not just one lane anymore. You have to be able to do a bunch of different things. And if writing is your thing, you still have to be able to kind of flex your muscles in different ways. And that reason, I was very lucky that in college I did that where I was like, I did the broadcast, so I had some broadcast skills. I did a radio show. I had, like almost like a podcast format with my friend. So I kind of had that, those skills and that background that when I'm like, I need to kind of expand, or when you need to expand, you're not scared to. Like, I'm not
Mm.
scared to get in front of a camera or read a script or do stuff like that because of stuff that I did in the past. But it really is about almost reinventing yourself, but being versatile and like being able to spread yourself out a bunch of different ways. Because now just staying in the one writing lane, it's not for many people. Like that's a columnist thing and like a newspaper thing. That's a very old way of thinking. That's like you said, slowly on his last legs and fizzling out. So it's tough. It's a tough place to exist, like I said. But if you're confident and your work is good, it's gonna speak for itself.
Yeah, and I think now the other challenge you guys probably have to deal with is the AI. The AI writing, AI doing stuff. I was I got we did our fantasy draft yesterday, and we get the big blog that from Yahoo from you guys and they rank you and they tell you what your grade was, and it says
Yeah,
generated by
yeah.
Chat GPT, and
That's GPT. Yeah,
it's like, oh
yeah.
my god, did Chat GPT just make me feel like crap because of my draft picks and stuff? And so,
Yeah.
what do you see? How do you feel about AI being involved?
It's part of it, and I just think it's part of the change. I remember we had a big meeting about that specifically, like about a month ago, and like, hey, we're going to start integrating ChatGPT into fantasy, and fantasy is huge. Fantasy is a consumer based market, and it's a huge one. So you get a lot of revenue off of it. A lot of content is driven off of it. So if you're integrating ChatGPT to something that important to the company, something that important to people, then it's relevant. It's super relevant, and it's going to be, I think it's only going to grow. It's going to enhance things. It's a tricky line to toe because I think, when it comes to just writing, a lot of people might try to take easy way outs in certain ways with that, but it's no denying that it's going to be a factor. And you're starting to see it, like you mentioned, little by little get integrated in these companies. And, how much has things changed from now to, well, from, 5 years ago to now. So imagine chat GPT and AI 5 years from now. It could be a whole different thing where it's a lot more immersive and inclusive in all these different lanes. So I'm interested to see how it happens. I don't know how it will, but I'm here for the ride, man. I've been here for the ride for this whole time. So we're gonna keep riding the wave and see how it changes, man.
Yeah, and I think flexibility in with change is really important in all careers. I think the way things are going now, you always have to be open. If you're stuck on one way of doing things, you're never going to go far because you're never going to be able to expand and learn something new and try that new technology that's going to help you. You never know. You might become that expert of creating articles with Chat GPT, and then boom,
Right.
that's a whole department that you're in charge of. You know what I mean, or a whole division. And so, it's interesting to see where this artificial intelligence is going to be. And it's funny because I'm close with one of my daughter's soccer coaches, and he's a teacher. So one of his part-time jobs is chatting with an AI to train it. And I didn't realize it. I was like, I kind of understood AI, but I was like, oh shoot, people really have to go and actually sit there and train it so I can
It's
pick up stuff.
real.
And he's doing like,
Yeah.
he's like, tell me, write me an article about Brad Pitt cheating on at work and stabbing someone, and the ChatGPT would do it. So it's crazy, dude.
And like I tell you, like some people, it's a tricky line because some people might take the easy way out, right?
Hmm.
And it's like back when you were in college, when you would always get warned about plagiarism and things like that. It's like some people use it for ideas. I have friends that use it for ideas now and formulate certain things and then go from there. But you never know how people are gonna interpret it or use it in whatever way they want to, manipulate it whatever way they want to. So it's tricky, but once again with the change, like this is a perfect example. I remember years ago betting used to be frowned upon.
Yeah.
Like sports betting, it's like, no, we can't even talk about that. We can't even say the word betting. It's illegal, this and that. Look at it now. This is
Yeah.
it's a massive thing. It's part of everything now in sports. And it's like how quickly that changed. Everything else is bound to change the same way too if there's emphasis and money and interest behind it. That's how it works.
Sports betting and ticket scalping. I remember back in the day, people would get arrested for selling tickets
Yeah.
overpriced, and now it's like you can't buy anything cheap. So
Wow. It's incredible, man. It's a nasty game.
yeah, exactly. Outside of AI, are there any other obstacles you think that might be coming up in the future?
It's hard to tell because, like I said, the digital space, somebody's probably working on the next thing right now, and
Hmm.
they're probably taking AI and Chat GPT and flipping that to their liking the way they want to. The digital space is there's so many brilliant people out there, man. I just don't realize how none of these people have been able to hack the student loan companies
Yeah,
and get rid of those.
Chat,
But I mean, people are
GPT, get
working.
rid of my student
Yeah.
loans, please.
If Chat GPT could do that, I'm in. I'm definitely in. But
Yeah,
yeah, like people are working on the next thing. Like who knows, man? Like it's so hard to even say what it would be, but I think in terms of like the actual traditional writing, you're going to see newspapers completely go away eventually. Like it's bound to happen. And it's sad, but I always tell people like the most important time that I spent in my career was working in a newspaper because I learned so much of the traditional journalism 101 skills that you don't get working anywhere else but a newspaper. Like that's why they call it journalism. Like it's a real simple thing, simple concept, but it's a very complicated process. But whatever happens, like I said, you have to kind of roll with the punches because the digital space evolves daily. It's not like it just happens in a few years or like this stuff is changing. Look at Twitter is a perfect example. It went from Twitter to X to limited characters to
yeah,
premium. Now Elon Musk is doing whatever he wants. Like, and people were freaking out, like, "Oh man, Twitter is gonna go away. Now we have to go use Threads." And I'm like, "What is Threads? Like, where is this stuff coming from? Like,
hmm,
who's making these rules up?" And
yeah.
it's crazy, man. You have to really be on it 24/7 and like be ready to hop on the next wave almost. Because if not, then you kind of you miss a mark and then you're playing from behind.
Yeah, it's amazing how much social media has been ingrained into every aspect of everything. Threads is a funny one because it's the same thing. It's like, "Oh, okay, now I got to do threads too." It's like every time I have to do one post, I got to post on 5 different things, and now they even have applications where it will post on 15 different locations for you. You know what I mean? If you remember that episode from The Office, you know what I mean? The wood, what do you call it, Wolf or something like that? That would
Mhm.
Twitter you, text you, Facebook you, and all
Man,
that stuff, man. It's crazy,
it's
dude.
unreal. It's unreal. And I think that it's only the reason I bring that up is because like think about the kids now. Like the kids are coming up now with TikTok. TikTok's like a glorified like we had to try to figure out how to use PowerPoint, bro. Like
Yeah.
that was like our hard. That was our obstacle. And I'm like, they're learning how to do this stuff at a young age. Like forget it when they're like 20, 30, like the amount of skills they're gonna have in the digital space to show and create something new. It's gonna be incredible.
And it's a good, you bring a good point because I feel like we're gonna have a lot more creativeness and content building people. This whole generation's big on that. Like my daughter, she loves making videos and trying to edit them on her iPad. She's 10. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And like, you know,
Amazing. Amazing.
where is she going to be in 10, 20 years when, we're going to, and just, I'm a movie fan. Just imagine how amazing the movies are going to be in like
Yeah.
30 years. But these kids have been doing uh, cinematography for 20, 30 years at the age of, 30. So, it's wild, dude. Um, so we go back to your journey and the entire process and everything like that. What is something you kind of would look back on and say, "Man, I wish I would have done this earlier." You know what I mean? I wish I would have pivoted here as opposed to here, or not focused on this.
Probably, I would say probably leaving ESPN because, like I mentioned, I think 5 years is a pretty long time. And it wasn't that I didn't like the company or like my job. I learned a lot. I met some amazing people, great network, obviously, just a great platform to have. But I think that there is a sense of complacency when you get to certain places that kind of scares you to do anything else because you're like, oh man, like I'm gonna leave ESPN. What is the perception gonna be? I remember when I said I was leaving, people were like, "You're going where? You're leaving here to go there?" And I'm like, you're looking at it the wrong way already. Like that's not what it's about. And I also say that it's more so personal because I'm like I spent prime years of my 20s in Connecticut, And I'm like, if I could have that time back, like somewhere else, I would have instantly done it at any chance I got.
Yeah,
But I didn't think about it that way when I was, 22, 23. When I'm turning 32 now, I'm like, damn, I was reliving in Connecticut when I could have been in LA, enjoying life a lot more than I was in Central Connecticut.
I moved to Houston when I was 28, and dollar beer nights and 50-cent drinks, and I was like, oh my god, I'm living the best life right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it's you bring a good point too when it comes to like staying at a job. For a lot of us, the old mentality has been stick to a job, keep working, stay there forever. You to stick with that one job for as long as you can. And it's different now. I mean, I've gained so much experience in the last 5 years going to two different jobs,
Mhm.
and that I'm a much better, I'm a more profitable person, to put myself out there.
Absolutely.
I can
No, no,
sell
for
myself
sure.
better. You have to take that risk to go and say, I'm going to learn something new at this job. And hopefully I can pivot that into my next position after that. And so I kind of
Yep.
started giving myself room because I did the same thing. My first job, I was there for like five years before they laid me off. And then the job before my previous job, I was there for like 7 years. I was
Mm.
there forever, but not moving up and anything like that. And so now I give myself a rule. I'm like 3 years, I'm moving up or moving out. That's I kind
Switch
of
the
give it
way you
that
do
just
it,
to
man.
I got to keep myself focused into what that cause and what's that next title that's going to get me that the bigger title moving
For
forward.
sure.
So
And I think it's twofold. You mentioned it like one is like yourself, right? I always tell people like people have a negative connotation with the word selfish. And I think we need to like take that out of our mentality. Like you need to be selfish enough in a certain point to be like, what's the best thing for me as a professional? Like what's going to help me, like you said, be profitable and sell myself and get me to the next step. That sort of selfishness. I always preach that in any type of, lane, wherever you're doing professionally, mentally, whatever. But the second part is the lifestyle, is the mental, the what type of life are you living that kind of has an effect. They both have an effect on each other. But that's why I bring up the Connecticut thing. I'm like, I was a young kid. I didn't really care about where I was. But now that I'm here in LA by myself in a massive city with all these different opportunities, I'm like, man, my lifestyle has become so much more healthy. It's better. It's just so many things that go into it, probably because I'm enjoying work a lot more too, but it's because I also carved that space out. And when I was at ESPN, it was very like work all the time, work all the time. And that's what you do when you're younger. Where now I'm like, nah, I need to escape from certain things. I mean, it's hard to escape from sports when you're a fan, right? Like even on days off, I'm watching games. It's hard to kind of create that balance, but I've gotten better at doing that because, you get older, you get wiser. But when you have those two different, like those two different avenues, everything's going to work better. Like I said, they both affect each other. So if one thing is a little too much, then something's going to get taken away from the other side. So it's like finding that balance. And I tell people all the time, like, it's not just about the move. It's just about where I'm at, that I finally have that balance. And I'm like, everything feels amazing because I've gotten to the point that I created what I wanted to.
yeah, that's awesome, man. And as far as we're always progressing. You're talking about moving up, moving forward. Like, what are some of the next steps you think you're headed to? Or
Yeah,
like,
it's a great question. It's like it's tough to really say too, and like specifically in certain moves, because I have been able to, like, when I got hired, I was an editor. Like now I'm a senior editor, so I have gotten promotions, and I'm coming up on 5 years at Yahoo now, and it has been like everything has been transitioning and progressing in the right way, and also like the writing thing, which is funny because like I have editorial roles, and now I carved the lane with writing, so I have a whole different avenue of, I guess, work and stuff to prove and things to show. And now I'm building that up once again. So to me, it's really like about progressing that and really using that platform to I don't want to say or short term goal, because it's kind of both right now. But like the World Cup's coming up in 2026 here. I'm all in on soccer since I've gotten to Yahoo, like covering it, writing, building up, contacts and stuff like that. So my goal for sure coming up, one really big one, is like when that World Cup is here, we're on that, like all over it. Like we're on it. I'm working. I'm doing different coverage for that because it's going to be a massive event. It's going to be something that I've been working towards. And it's like almost like a next step in the progression. Like this is the hard work I put in, this amount of years for it to get to this point, which is amazing because there's going to be games here in LA. There's going to be
yeah,
games all around the country. And it's like, bro, it's like
uh,
almost, it really is like a dream come true. So that's like one thing that I'm really just kind of keep my feet on the ground with, and keep building these relations and just keep getting my name out there, because now it's about that again, right? Now it's like, oh, Andy, like we know Andy, he covers this, he does this, he writes these stories. Now I'm getting more opportunities, and it just grows naturally that way. So I'm really all in on like building that and continuing that way.
Nice, awesome, man. Well, I wish you all the best. You know, I love when you post things on Facebook and I get to like them and be like, oh shit, my boy's doing it. He's doing it in LA. But you know,
Right.
is there any just I mean before we end, is there anything we talked about social being important to press out? Is there anything you want to blast on here?
Yeah, I mean, I use Twitter. Twitter's like my biggest outlet. It's just my name, Andy underscore Deossa, and it's like where I post a lot of my work. I think it's you do build these audiences. Like I said earlier, it's not typically a fan base, but it's like more audiences of like, oh, if I cover a LA team, then I'm gonna have a lot of people from LA on my Twitter. So that type of stuff they feed into. I've been trying to be more open because Yahoo is a national outlet, so I'm not just because I'm based in LA. I'm not just the LA guy. But yeah, I use Twitter as like my way of like connecting with people, my way of promoting my work and kind of just getting things out there. And it's also like an outlet to just talk too, man. Like sometimes I'll just have a random thought, a funny thought, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna put this out there. Like Instagram to me is a lot more just like pictures, and
Mhm.
I'll use it as a little bit of work, and I'll put some stuff out there because it's visual and it's easier to put videos out there. But I'm not too deep into like the reels and creating all these like I'm very traditional in that sense. And I think Twitter's always helped me out that way. And then Facebook, which is funny because my old Facebook, I got locked out of it. So this is a new one that I'm on. And I don't have that as many friends as I had in the old one. But Facebook to me is, like you said, a good way to keep the people in the loop and also keep connected with people that, I haven't seen in a while or from back home. So yeah, I use the socials, but when it comes to work, Twitter is like, or X, whatever they call it now, is the one that I'm on probably the most because once again, when I was younger and it was coming up, it was a way that helped me work, and it still does help me work when I get all my news and instantly updates from games and stuff like that. So Twitter's where it's at for me, man.
Nice, man. Well, I really appreciate you being here. I wish you all the best out there in Los Angeles, and for everyone else listening, once again, thank you all for being here, and hope you'll join me again next time as we continue to learn how to say success in Spanglish. Thanks, Andy.
Appreciate you, man.